Jiro was the kind of kid who never really fit in anywhere. At school, most of his classmates treated him like some strange weirdo, and because of that, he had no real friends to talk to. One day, he was sitting there complaining about how everyone saw him, while someone beside him tried to cheer him up and told him that being different was not always a bad thing. The funny part is that the one giving him that advice was actually his dog, which honestly makes it a little easier to understand why everyone thought Jiro was strange. The truth is, Jiro had been born with a rare ability that allowed him to hear the voices of animals. To him, speaking with them felt completely normal, but to everyone else, watching him casually talk to cats, dogs, and birds was more than enough to make them keep their distance. So as Jiro grew older, the only companions he truly had were the animals around his neighborhood, and because they were the only ones who accepted him, he was willing to go pretty far to protect them, even if that meant picking fights with delinquents who tried to hurt them. After Jiro chased those delinquents away, the cat and crow he protected thanked him for stepping in, explaining that those guys had been bothering them a lot recently. Jiro acted like it was nothing and started heading home. But the moment he returned, his grandfather immediately started yelling at him after realizing he had gotten into another fight. He reminded Jiro that he did not teach him shinobi techniques just so he could run around the neighborhood beating people up. Then he accused Jiro of embarrassing their family name, but Jiro coldly said he did not care about that stupid name at all. That comment pushed his grandfather over the edge, and in a fit of rage, the old man grabbed the family's treasured katana and started chasing Jiro around the house. Soon after, things finally calmed down. Jiro and his grandfather ended up fixing the broken doors, but then his grandfather remembered that he had a community meeting to attend. And since he would be coming home late, he told Jiro to lock everything up before going to sleep. Jiro quietly complained under his breath, but he still agreed. However, shortly after his grandfather left, the same crow from earlier suddenly appeared and called out to Jiro, asking for help. Apparently, there was a cat badly hurt somewhere in the woods. Jiro had no idea what was really going on, but he followed the crow anyway. When they reached the spot, he found a cat lying beneath a tree with severe injuries. Neither Jiro nor the crow had ever seen that cat in the area before, and they could not figure out what had happened to it. But since the cat was still breathing, Jiro decided he was going to do whatever he could to save it. What Jiro did not know was that this injured cat was not an ordinary animal at all. Before ending up in that condition, he was known as Rago, the Devourer of the Sun. He had been summoned by a mysterious group that wanted to control his power for their own purposes. But when Rago refused to obey them, the very people who summoned him tried to kill him instead. When Rago finally opened his eyes again, he found himself lying in a soft, warm cat bed inside Jiro's house. A moment later, Jiro came into the room to check on him. He was relieved to see that the cat had finally woken up, because with injuries that severe, Jiro honestly had not been sure whether it would survive. Since he figured the cat was probably thirsty, he placed a bowl of water nearby. Then he introduced himself and casually asked the cat to do the same. Rago immediately thought Jiro had to be a complete idiot. Even if he gave his name, there was no way an ordinary human could understand a cat's words. But Jiro instantly responded, telling him it was rude to call someone an idiot for no reason. The moment Rago realized that Jiro could actually understand him, he panicked and shot under the bed, refusing to come out. To him, a human understanding animal speech made absolutely no sense. Jiro understood why Rago was startled, especially if he had never spoken to a human before, so he calmly told him that he was safe here and that nobody was going to hurt him. But Rago did not trust the situation that easily. He could not sense any spiritual energy coming from Jiro, which meant Jiro really did seem to be human. Still, Rago decided it was safer to stay hidden until he found a chance to escape. That plan lasted only a few seconds because Jiro soon returned with food. The second Rago smelled it, all of his caution disappeared. He was starving, and his pride clearly was not stronger than his hunger. Jiro found it funny how quickly Rago gave in, but Rago did not look embarrassed at all. He simply said that no hungry man would ever turn down a meal. Jiro laughed at the idea of a cat calling itself a man, but Rago immediately snapped back and insisted that he was not a cat. He then properly introduced himself as an immortal being, or as they were more commonly known in this world, a mononoke. Rago explained that mononoke often take the form of humans or animals and live among normal people without being discovered. Jiro did not fully understand everything he was saying, but one question immediately came to mind. If mononoke were supposed to be such powerful beings, then how did Rago end up beaten and injured like this? Rago answered that another mononoke had been responsible. When Jiro asked why they attacked him, Rago admitted that his memories were still unclear. He could not remember every detail, but he knew that another mononoke had come to him wanting his help with something. And when Rago refused, they turned on him. Jiro started piecing the situation together. From what Rago was saying, it sounded like those guys asked for his cooperation, and the moment he rejected them, they jumped him. Still, Jiro did not understand why Rago refused in the first place. Since they were Mononoke too, he assumed Rago would want to help someone from his own kind, but Rago made it clear that he hated people like that. To him, they were nothing but parasites, the type who acted strong while depending entirely on someone else's power. Rago then said there was probably no point explaining any of this to Jiro anyway, since a normal human would never believe a story about immortals and monsters. But Jiro reminded him that he was talking to someone who had been able to speak with animals his entire life. Compared to that, the idea of immortal monsters living in secret was not really the craziest thing he had ever heard. At the same time, deep in the forest, a female agent arrived at the place where Jiro had originally discovered Rago. After examining the area, she contacted headquarters and reported that she had found a pool of blood. The blood had already been confirmed as Rago's, but there was one strange detail. She could not sense his spiritual presence anywhere nearby, and because of that, she believed he must have survived and gone into hiding somewhere in the area. Her superior ordered her to wait until the rest of the search team arrived before doing anything else, so she agreed to fall back for now and disappeared into the thin air. But she was not the only one searching the forest for signs of Rago. Back at Jiro's house, things were far calmer. Jiro was giving Rago a bath, partly to clean him up and partly to help himself relax. He was honestly surprised by how fast Rago's wounds had healed, because the injured cat from earlier already looked almost completely fine. As he washed him, Jiro started remembering his old dog Nachi. She had been huge, fluffy, and always knew exactly how to comfort him. Whenever Jiro came home after being bullied or hurt, Naki would ask him to give her a bath, because she somehow knew that doing something simple like that helped him calm down. At night, Jiro went to sleep. At least, that was what Rago believed. The moment he thought Jiro was fully asleep, he climbed onto the windowsill and prepared to leave. Rago did not want to disappear without saying anything, especially after Jiro had saved his life. But he understood that staying in that house would only drag Jiro into danger, so he jumped out the window. And when he landed, his body wavered slightly. His injuries may have closed, but his strength still had not fully returned. Even so, he tried to leave the property. Before he could get far, Jiro suddenly appeared behind him and asked where he thought he was going in the middle of the night. Rago froze in shock because he was certain he had just seen Jiro sleeping upstairs. But Jiro had already guessed that Rago might try to sneak away, so he had placed a dummy illusion in his bed to fool him. Rago was annoyed by the cheat trick, but he still told Jiro to stop involving himself in his problems. As far as Rago was concerned, Jiro had already done more than enough. But Jiro refused to let him walk away like that. He reminded Rago that he was the one who saved him, and that meant Rago was his responsibility until he recovered properly. Rago snapped back that he never asked to be saved in the first place. In fact, if Jiro had not interfered, Rago would have been perfectly fine with dying out there. Jiro kept trying to argue with him, but Rago finally ran out of patience. He reminded Jiro that no matter how harmless he looked right now, he was still a Mononoke, a monster known for eating humans. Because of that, the smartest thing Jiro could do was return to bed, forget this ever happened, and pretend they had never met. But before Jiro could respond, a strange man suddenly stepped into the house and interrupted them. Jiro had no idea who this stranger was, so he immediately told him to leave, since nobody had invited him there. But the man looked down on him and called him an ignorant human. Then his arm began to twist and transform into something monstrous before he launched himself straight at Jiro. The attack came so suddenly that Jiro did not have enough time to react. But Rago refused to watch him get killed. Even in his weakened state, he leaped forward, shoved Jiro out of the way, and lured the attacker into the forest. Rago tried to escape through the trees, but his body still had not recovered its original strength. Because of that, the demon caught up to him almost immediately and slammed him into the ground. Standing over him, the demon told Rago that he still had a chance to change his mind and cooperate. After all, their side had gone through a lot of trouble to break the seal that had kept Rago imprisoned, and killing him after all that effort would be a waste. But Rago only mocked him. If they wanted his power that badly, then they would have to risk their lives and take it by force. The demon charged at him again, ready to crush him completely. But before the attack could land, Jiro suddenly appeared with his family katana and sliced across the demon's arm. Rago was stunned that Jiro had actually returned. He called him an idiot for throwing away the chance he had given him to run, but Jiro refused to leave him behind. He said he could not just abandon Rago in the forest and let that monster kill him. And even if he had run away, the demon probably would have come after him next anyway, so fighting back was the only choice that made sense. The demon then revealed its full monstrous form and prepared to tear Jiro apart. However, it was surprised to see that Jiro did not flinch at all, even after seeing its true appearance. Then it noticed the markings on Jiro's katana and remembered the stealth technique he had just used. From that, the demon realized that Jiro was likely connected to the shinobi. Without wasting any more time, the demon rushed in and threw a heavy punch. For a second, it seemed like the attack had landed, but when the demon looked at its fist, it found only a piece of cloth. Jiro had already slipped away and was coming down from above for a counterattack. The move was clever, but Jiro had badly misjudged the monster's speed. Before he could strike, the demon vanished behind him in an instant and drove its finger straight through Jiro's back. Even after taking such a serious wound, Jiro still tried to swing his katana for one final attack. But the demon leaped back and avoided it easily. It was impressive that Jiro could even think about attacking while injured that badly, but in the end, it made no difference. A wound like that was far too severe for any normal human to survive. Rago slowly approached Jiro and stared down at his dying body, overwhelmed with guilt. He knew that none of this would have happened if Jiro had never gotten involved with him. But when the demon noticed the way Rago was looking at Jiro, he misunderstood the situation completely. He assumed Rago was thinking about eating him, since consuming a human would help him recover his original strength. Because of that, the demon offered to let Rago have Jiro's body, hoping that regaining his power would convince him to finally cooperate with their side. But Rago had no intention of doing something like that. It was true that eating Jiro would restore his strength, but Jiro had saved his life, protected him, and even risked everything for him. Rago owed him far too much to let him die here. So instead of devouring Jiro, Rago chose the opposite. He decided to let Jiro take in his power. Rago transformed into his true form and flew straight into Jiro's body, releasing a massive surge of dark energy. As Rago's power began flooding out, the demon was left in disbelief. He could not believe that Rago would go so far as to turn against his own kind and hand his strength over to a human. A moment later, Jiro regained consciousness as Rago's power healed the wound in his back. He had no idea what had just happened, and the black smoke pouring from his body only made him even more confused. Then Rago's voice echoed inside his head, telling him to stop panicking and focus because the fight was not over yet. The demon attacked again, but this time, Jiro's body moved completely differently. With Rago's power inside him, he was fast enough to avoid the demon's strikes and dodge before he could be stabbed again. Still, Jiro had no clue how he was supposed to defeat a monster like this. That was when Rago told him not to overthink it. All Jiro needed to do was make a fist, and Rago would take care of the rest. Jiro did not fully understand what that meant, but he trusted him and threw a punch anyway. The moment his fist moved forward, Rago released his energy through the attack, blasting straight through the demon's torso and killing him with a single strike. Jiro could only stand there in shock, struggling to process everything that had just happened. But before he had any time to calm down, agents from the Espionage Bureau suddenly surrounded him. They had arrived after detecting the powerful spiritual disturbance in the area, and without giving Jiro a chance to explain, they knocked him unconscious and took him back to find out what really happened. When Jiro finally comes to, he is lying in a hospital bed with the same girl who knocked him unconscious standing beside him. The moment she notices that he has opened his eyes, she immediately calls her superior to report that Jiro is finally awake. Jiro still has no clue who she is or why he has been brought here, so he demands an explanation. But before she can answer, Rago suddenly emerges from his body and admits that he is just as confused as Jiro. A moment later, Ichika notices Rago casually sitting on top of Jiro's head. Jiro finally feels him there and starts shouting for Rago to get off. Not long after that, Ichika's superior arrives to examine the situation himself. He says he is relieved to see that Jiro appears unharmed, then asks Rago how he is feeling. Rago, however, has absolutely no interest in speaking with him. Despite the obvious hostility, the man is surprised by how restrained Rago seems, since he expected the Mononoke to react far more aggressively. The man then introduces himself as Ryosuke Shiba, the head of the Mononoke division, while Ichika is one of the agents working under him. Since Jiro wants to understand what is happening, Shiba begins by asking whether he has ever heard of the Oniwa Band. Jiro remembers learning that they were covert operatives who once served the Edo shogunate. Shiba explains that after the shogunate disappeared, the organization continued operating under the modern government and eventually became known as the Bureau of Espionage. Its agents now handle intelligence gathering, undercover operations, and the the elimination of dangerous Mononoke. That is why the government has an entire division dedicated to Mononoke-related incidents. Until recently, Shiba's job had been fairly quiet because most Mononoke rarely caused any serious problems. But the situation suddenly changed when a group of them attacked one of the Bureau's facilities. During the assault, Raigo, who had been sealed inside that building, managed to escape. Even so, Shiba still has no idea how Jiro and Raigo ended up fused together, so he asked Jiro to explain everything from the beginning. After hearing the full story, Ichika immediately calls Jiro an idiot for risking his life to save a Mononoke without having any kind of plan. Jiro fires back that he does not need criticism from some stranger he only just met, and Shiba tells Ichika to settle down and focus on the real problem. Jiro and Raigo have completely merged, and unless they discover a way to separate them, Jiro may remain like this permanently. They currently have no method of reversing the fusion, and they also have no idea what the other Mononoke involved in the attack might be planning. Because of that, Shiba informs Jiro that the Bureau will be placing him under protective custody. Jiro immediately objects, but Shiba makes it clear that he has no real choice. The Bureau is not some heroic organization devoted to protecting everyone's freedom, and its agents are under no obligation to prioritize Jiro's personal rights over national security. They have already prepared a missing person report to cover his disappearance, and he will be transferred to another facility the following morning. For now, Shiba tells him to rest and mentions that several guards have been stationed outside his room. He claims they are there to protect Jiro in case something happens, but Jiro can easily tell that their real purpose is to make sure he does not flee. Jiro cannot stop worrying about what might happen if the Bureau takes him away. There is a real chance he may never see his grandfather again. Raigo points out that this is exactly why he kept warning Jiro that getting involved with him would only bring trouble into his life. Jiro says he is really not in the mood for another lecture, but Raigo explains that he is not trying to scold him. He simply wants Jiro to understand how dangerous his current situation truly is. Shiba and Ichika may claim that everything they are doing is meant to protect Jiro, but they are also members of the same organization that imprisoned Raigo in the first place. Because of that, Raigo finds it difficult to believe they will simply allow Jiro to return to an ordinary life after merging with the Mononoke, and then there are the Mononoke who attacked the facility specifically to free Raigo. If they were willing to challenge the entire Bureau to reach him, there is no chance they will give up now. Sooner or later, they will come after Jiro as well. At this point, Jiro cannot rely on either side and will have to decide for himself what he wants to do. After thinking everything over, Jiro decides he is done letting other people control his choices. From now on, he is going to do what he believes is right, regardless of what anyone says. His first decision is to escape from the hospital. Raigo is surprised since he assumed Jiro had nowhere left to run, but Jiro explains that he is not planning to run away permanently. There are simply a few things he needs to take care of first. Once he has done that, he will accept whatever consequences come afterward. Raigo still has no idea what Jiro is planning, but he warns him that there is no guarantee things will work out. He also makes it clear that Jiro cannot expect him to step in and solve every problem. Jiro says he will somehow manage on his own. Just then, he notices several crows gathered outside the window, and an idea immediately comes to him. While the guards remain stationed outside the room, Jiro suddenly begins making as much noise as possible. The moment they rush inside to see what is happening, he calls out to the crows and asks them to attack. The birds instantly swarm the guards, creating enough confusion for Jiro to slip past them and escape. Raigo is amazed that the plan actually worked, but Jiro never doubted it for a second. Those crows are his friends, and whenever he asks them for help, they are always willing to come through for him in exchange for a bag of snacks. After putting enough distance between himself and the hospital, Jiro stops to thank the crows for their help. Then he rewards them with a bag of snacks like he promised before sending them on their way. Even though he successfully escaped, Raigo reminds him that the Bureau is probably already searching the entire area. Jiro says he is not concerned about that yet. There is still one important thing he needs to do before anything else. Not long afterward, Jiro arrives back at his house. At that point, Raigo finally understands why he was so determined to get away. Even if the Bureau intends to take him somewhere he may never return from, Jiro wants the chance to speak with his grandfather first. The last thing he wants is for the old man to believe that his grandson simply disappeared without a word. Jiro remains outside for a while, struggling to figure out how he could possibly explain everything that has happened. But before he can organize his thoughts, his grandfather suddenly appears behind him and nearly scares him out of his skin. Jiro immediately starts trying to explain himself, but his grandfather cuts him off and tells him to stay quiet and follow. With no idea what the old man is thinking, Jiro decides to obey him for the moment. After walking for a while, Jiro realizes that his grandfather has brought him into a completely deserted stadium. With the bureau likely searching for him already, he becomes impatient and asks how much longer they are going to keep wandering around. He escaped because he needed to speak with the old man before they found him, not spend what little time he has left walking in circles. When Jiro asked why they came to this place at all, his grandfather explains that he wanted somewhere private where nobody would be able to step between them. Before Jiro can ask what he means, the old man drives his fist straight into his face and sends him crashing to the ground. Jiro stares up at him in shock and demands an explanation, only to be called a complete fool for failing to understand the consequences of his actions. Since Jiro still looks confused, his grandfather reveals that Shiba contacted him and explained everything. He already knows that Jiro allowed himself to become fused with a Mononoke. He might have dismissed the story as nonsense if he had only heard it from someone else, but with Raigo visibly attached to Jiro, there's no possible way to deny the truth. What shocks Jiro even more is that his grandfather seems perfectly familiar with the Bureau and the existence of Mononoke. That is when he learns the old man was once an operative in the Bureau of Espionage. Although this is the last outcome he ever wanted, his grandfather believes he now has a duty to clean up the disaster his grandson created. His solution is to eliminate Jiro and Raigo together before either side can turn them into a weapon. And once he finishes them, he plans to end his own life as punishment for failing Jiro in the first place. Jiro desperately tries to talk some sense into him, but his grandfather has already decided that there is nothing left to discuss. He launches forward without warning and brings down a crushing axe kick. Jiro manages to throw himself aside just before it connects, but the anger on the old man's face is unlike anything he has ever seen. Before Jiro can even steady himself, his grandfather appears directly in front of him and strikes with such speed that Jiro is thrown back onto the ground. Standing over him, the old man explains that the combat techniques passed down through the Azuma family were designed to kill both human enemies and Mononoke. Jiro was only taught a small part of them because his grandfather wanted him to have enough skill to protect himself, not become involved in this hidden world. He regrets that Jiro will die before discovering how far his abilities could have developed, but in his eyes, that is still kinder than leaving him alive to be dragged into the horrors surrounding Mononoke. At the very least, he promises that the final strike will be fast enough that Jiro will feel almost nothing. As his grandfather prepares to finish it, Raigo suddenly takes control and catches the incoming blow, forcing the old man several steps backward. Raigo shouts at Jiro to stop standing there in a daze and recognize that this is not some misunderstanding. His grandfather is genuinely trying to end his life, but rather than accept Raigo's protection, Jiro orders him to disappear and remain inside until he is personally called out again. Whatever happens here, he wants to face his grandfather using his own strength. Raigo cannot understand the decision. Jiro has already been overwhelmed and clearly has no realistic chance of winning alone. Even so, Jiro refuses to change his mind, realizing that arguing will not get through to him. Raigo finally backs down and agrees to remain out of the fight. Seeing Jiro refuse to back down brings an old memory rushing back to his grandfather. When Jiro was still a child, he once spotted a kitten trap near the top of an enormous tree and immediately climbed after it. Saving the animal was the only thing on his mind, so he never bothered thinking about how he would get back down afterward. His grandfather happened to be there and caught him when he fell, but the rescue was followed by a serious scolding. Wanting to help someone was admirable, yet charging into situations far beyond his ability would eventually cost Jiro his life. The old man warned him that he could not keep carrying every burden alone and needed to trust the people around him whenever a problem became too much to handle. Jiro then asked what he should do if nobody was there to support him. His grandfather bluntly answered that he would have no choice but to walk away. However, Jiro refused to accept a life where he had to abandon someone simply because he was too weak to help. Hearing that, his grandfather gave him one final answer. If giving up was unacceptable, then Jiro would have to become strong enough that no situation could ever force him to do so. Returning his attention to the present, the old man warns Jiro that the hidden world of Mononoke is far more horrifying than anything he can imagine. He had once been dragged into that world himself, where he was forced to kill both humans and Mononoke until he nearly lost sight of who he was. It is a merciless place that slowly destroys anyone caught inside it, which is why he spent years keeping Jiro as far away from it as possible. But after everything that has happened, he feels that all those efforts have ended in failure. Jiro apologizes and admits that this disaster began because he interfered without understanding the consequences. Even so, he cannot regret saving someone who needed his help. Since his decision created this problem, Jiro intends to take responsibility and find a way to fix it himself. Furious at what he sees as pure ignorance, his grandfather calls him a fool and rushes forward. Raigo shouts for Jiro to move, yet Jiro refuses to dodge. He receives the punch directly, gets launched backward by the impact, and still manages to plant his feet beneath him instead of falling. Rago is stunned that Jiro willingly took the attack, while his grandfather immediately understands what he was trying to prove. The old man calls the gesture reckless and tells him that enduring a punch does not demonstrate anything beyond his ability to absorb pain. Jiro expected that his determination alone would not be enough to change his mind. However, unlike when he was younger, he is no longer facing everything by himself. Whenever his own strength falls short, he now has Rago beside him. Trying to make the moment sound impressive, Jiro suddenly tells Rago to do that thing. Unfortunately, Rago has absolutely no idea what he means, completely ruining the dramatic moment and making Jiro look ridiculous. The two immediately begin bickering over whose fault it was. Watching them argue reminds the old man of the lesson he gave Jiro years ago about finding someone he could depend on. Their relationship may look chaotic, but he can clearly see the truth underneath it. When real danger arrives, Rago would put his life on the line for Jiro, and Jiro would do exactly the same for him. Realizing his grandson may have finally found the support he always needed, the old man orders them to stop arguing and declares that the fight is over. He gives Jiro permission to choose his own path, although he still makes it perfectly clear that getting himself into this situation was unbelievably foolish. Later that night, everyone returns home, and Jiro lowers himself into a hot bath to relax after the chaos of the day. While soaking, he apologizes to Rago for treating him selfishly and pulling him into a personal fight that had nothing to do with him. Rago says he is not particularly bothered by it, but asks Jiro to start depending on him properly instead of taking every attack alone. That way, Jiro might avoid getting beaten half to death the next time something goes wrong. Jiro agrees, though neither of them knows what kind of trouble awaits them from this point forward, since starting tomorrow, Jiro will officially begin working alongside the Bureau of Espionage. By the following day, Jiro has already packed everything he might need. He knows the Bureau could arrive at any moment to take him away, and Rago still cannot understand why he is going along with them so easily. There is no telling what they plan to do once they get him inside their headquarters. Jiro admits that the thought worries him, but stressing over it will not change anything. Running is not a real solution either, because the Bureau would continue hunting him wherever he went. More importantly, he refuses to drag his grandfather back into this mess after everything that happened, so rather than spend his life hiding, Jiro decides to meet the problem directly and deal with whatever is waiting for him. When he steps outside to meet the agent assigned to collect him, Jiro is immediately disappointed to find Ichika waiting there. Out of everyone the Bureau could have sent, they chose the one person he can barely stand being around. Ichika explains that she was specifically ordered to prevent him from pulling another escape like the one at the hospital. She points toward the transport vehicle and tells Jiro that he will remain in the rear compartment with her until they reach headquarters. Jiro hates the idea of spending the entire trip trapped beside her, but he has no power to change the arrangement. After saying goodbye to his grandfather, he climbs into the truck, only for Ichika to lock a pair of handcuffs around his wrists almost immediately. Jiro demands to know whether the restraints are really necessary when he came willingly and has shown no intention of resisting. Ichika bluntly replies that in her eyes, he is still a prisoner, and after merging with Rago, she no longer considers him completely human. She does not understand why the Bureau's leaders are so determined to keep him alive, but her orders are to deliver him safely, and she intends to follow them regardless of how unpleasant it is to guard someone she considers a freak. Being called a freak immediately gets under Jiro's skin, especially since he had been holding back and trying to treat Ichika politely because she was a girl. That comment only makes her angrier. Thinking he is underestimating her, Ichika drives her fist into the wall beside him and warns Jiro to be far more careful with his words. Their argument is interrupted when Rago appears and asks them both to lower their voices because he is trying to sleep, and after looking Ichika over, he adds that the Bureau must be seriously lacking personnel if they are relying on someone so young to escort them. Ichika snaps at him to keep his opinions to himself, saying she has no interest in listening to criticism from a Mononoke. Rago calmly tells her that his comment should be the least of her concerns. She may not have noticed it yet, but something dangerous is already happening around them. Almost on cue, the transport vehicle enters a wall of thick fog. The two agents in the front are confused by how quickly the road disappeared from view and struggle to understand where the mist came from. But before they can react, something goes wrong, and the truck suddenly crashes. Jiro and Ichika are violently thrown around inside the rear compartment as the vehicle comes to a stop. Ichika has no idea what caused the accident, but she immediately senses that this is more than a normal crash, so she orders Jiro to remain inside while she heads out to investigate. The moment Ichika steps outside, she realizes the truck has somehow crossed into a spectral zone. What confuses her most is that she failed to notice the transition until now, but she has no time to think about that. Two Mononoke immediately reveal themselves nearby, and the bodies of both drivers have already been devoured. And since the creatures are obviously here for Rago, Ichika activates her equipment and prepares to stop them before they can reach the truck. She opens fire on the larger Mononoke first, only to discover that ordinary bullets cannot penetrate its body. Meanwhile, its smaller companion moves far too quickly for her to keep it in her sights, and with her firearm proving useless against both enemies, Ichika draws her close-range weapon and shifts into melee combat. The smaller creature strikes her hard enough to send her toward the larger one, but she uses her knife to regain control of her movement, slips past the incoming punch, and cuts across the giant's arm several times. Unfortunately, the creature's flesh is so unnaturally dense that her blade leaves only shallow wounds. Ichika immediately understands that none of the weapons she brought can seriously injure it, and the smaller Mononoke is just as troublesome, because the instant her attention shifts away, it appears behind her and launches her straight into the side of the transport truck. From inside, Jiro sees the metal wall suddenly cave inward and starts wondering what kind of disaster is happening outside. This was supposed to be a simple trip to Bureau headquarters, yet it sounds like the truck is being torn apart. Rago explains that Ichika is most likely fighting Mononoke, and judging by the noise, she is losing badly. When Jiro asks how they were attacked without noticing, Rago tells him that the vehicle must have entered a spectral zone while they were distracted by their argument. Jiro has never heard that term before, so Rago explains that a spectral zone is a separate dimension disconnected from the normal human world, essentially a domain belonging to the Mononoke. Humans occasionally stumble into such places by accident, but escaping after crossing over can be extremely difficult. Jiro barely understands the explanation, but that is not important right now. The sounds outside make it obvious that Ichika will be killed if no one helps her soon, so he asks Rago to break the handcuffs. Rago tells him that it is impossible. The restraints were made from a special substance that suppresses spiritual power, meaning he cannot damage them while Jiro is still wearing them. Growing impatient, Jiro decides to leave the truck and make Ichika unlock the cuffs herself so he can join the fight. Rago advises him to stay where he is and allow the two sides to destroy each other. From his perspective, the Bureau is no different from the Mononoke chasing them. Both crews want control of Jiro and intend to use his fusion with Rago for their own benefit. Letting them continue fighting would give Jiro the perfect opportunity to escape. His argument is reasonable, but Jiro cannot accept it. Whatever Ichika personally thinks of him, she is still outside risking her life to keep the creatures away from the truck. Even if she is only following orders and happens to be incredibly rude, Jiro refuses to sit safely inside while someone dies protecting him. So whether Rago agrees or not, he is going out there to support her. But before Jiro can make a move, the larger Mononoke drives its fist into the transport truck and tears through the side of it, sending Jiro tumbling across the grass. The moment both creatures see him, they identify him as the person they were ordered to capture, and since their mission requires bringing him back alive, they offer him the chance to surrender peacefully and promise not to harm him if he cooperates. Jiro pays absolutely no attention to them. Instead, he shouts at Ichika to remove the handcuffs so he can join the fight. To his disbelief, she refuses, saying she would rather face the creatures alone than accept help from someone fused with the Mononoke. The enemies attack again before either of them can continue arguing, forcing Jiro and Ichika to leap away in opposite directions. Jiro tells her to stop allowing her hatred to control her decisions. If she keeps rejecting his help, neither of them is going to leave this place alive. His words bring back one of Ichika's most painful memories, standing at her mother's funeral after losing her to a Mononoke. From that moment onward, Ichika dedicated herself to becoming strong enough to fight them, believing it was the path her mother would have wanted her to follow. She desperately wants to prove that she can complete this mission alone, but the battle has already shown her otherwise. Jiro reminds her that protecting him is still her responsibility, and if she truly refuses to let the mission fail, then she must use every option available to survive, even if that means fighting beside someone she despises. Every belief Ichika has held since childhood tells her to reject him, yet she can no longer deny that his argument is right. After hesitating briefly, Ichika finally changes her mind and destroys the restraints around Jiro's wrists. The instant his hands are free, Jiro launches himself high into the air and calls on Rago's power. Their combined strike crashes directly into the larger Mononoke and eliminates it with a single blow. Its smaller companion becomes completely distracted by the sudden death of its partner, giving Ichika the opening she needs. She slits behind the creature before it can react and cuts it apart with a rapid series of attacks. Jiro's victory is somewhat less graceful, however, because he he put far too much power into his jump and comes crashing back down afterward. Once he recovers, Ichika stands nearby and bluntly tells him not to expect any gratitude from her. Jiro replies that he never helped her for the sake of being thanked. She had risked herself to protect him, so he simply returned the favor, meaning neither of them owes the other anything. Even though she refuses to admit it openly, the encounter clearly improves Ichika's opinion of him. With both Mononoke defeated, they are left facing a much less dangerous but extremely annoying problem. Their transport has been completely destroyed, so Jiro asks how they are supposed to reach headquarters now, and Ichika casually informs him that they will have to complete the rest of the journey on foot. At the same time, Shiba is meeting with the Bureau's senior officials and proposing the creation of a new field unit that would include both Jiro and Rago. The council initially considers the suggestion completely unreasonable, but Shiba argues that Rago has not shown any aggression toward Bureau personnel since merging with Jiro. For the moment, he appears willing to cooperate with the boy, which means controlling the situation may actually be possible. It has also become obvious that an enemy group is actively targeting Rago, so keeping Jiro in prison would not make that threat disappear. And instead of locking the two away and leaving them unprepared, Shiba believes they should be allowed to operate in the field, develop their abilities, and gain enough combat experience so they will not be easy targets if the enemy comes after them. Shiba continues by arguing that locking Jiro inside a cell would accomplish absolutely nothing. The enemy already knows about him, which means they will keep searching for him regardless of where the Bureau hides him. If another attack is inevitable, then Jiro would be far better off gaining real combat experience than wasting his time behind bars. Shiba even agrees to accept complete responsibility for every decision Jiro and Rago make from that point onward. His argument proves convincing enough that the senior officials finally approve his proposal and give him permission to handle the situation however he sees fit. The following morning, Jiro stands beside the docks brushing his teeth while reflecting on how completely his life has fallen apart in only a week. Not long ago, he was an ordinary student with ordinary problems except talking with animals. Then he discovered a strange cat, was murdered by a massive ogre, came back fused with a Mononoke, and somehow ended up working for a secret government organization. Shiba soon walks over and asks how he is settling into his new surroundings. Jiro replies that he has barely had the chance to settle into anything, since the Bureau has spent nearly every waking moment running tests on his body. He also still cannot believe that this rundown shipping yard is supposed to be their headquarters. Shiba explains that each Bureau division operates from a separate location designed to blend naturally into the surrounding area. Some divisions use office buildings, while others work out of temples or similar places. Unfortunately, the second division was assigned an old shipping yard, and now that Jiro belongs to the team, he is stuck with it as well. Before Jiro can complain any further, a car enters the base and a young woman steps out. Jiro asks who she is, and Shiba introduces her as Hana Usami, the unit's new assistant chief. Another agent climbs out moments later and immediately begins shamelessly flirting with Hana. His name is Reiji Kirihara. Once everyone gathers inside, Shiba formally introduces the new team and says he hopes they can work together without causing too much trouble. That hope immediately looks unrealistic, since Jiro and Ichika still cannot stand each other. Reichi, however, has no trouble charming her. After only a few minutes of conversation, he overwhelms Ichika with compliments until she begins turning red. But his attitude changes completely when he looks at Jiro, as Reichi makes no effort to hide his disgust towards someone who is now part human and part Mononoke. Jiro refuses to sit quietly while being insulted, so he steps directly into Reiji's face and asks whether he wants to settle the problem with a fight, and Reiji gladly accepts and says he would be more than happy to beat him down. Ichika immediately tries to stop the confrontation before it becomes serious, but Shiba has the exact opposite reaction and seems almost delighted by the idea. He even asks Hana to take out a camera and record the entire thing. Part of him simply wants to enjoy the spectacle, but the fight also serves a practical purpose. They still have no reliable understanding of Jiro's physical limits or how much power he can access through Rago, and without that information, they cannot decide how to use him effectively during actual missions. Once Hana begins recording, Shiba steps back, gives both fighters the signal, and officially starts the match. Just then, Rago materializes behind Jiro with a tired yawn and complains that nobody seems capable of letting him sleep in peace. Jiro tells him to disappear again because he didn't call him out, but according to Rago, he could feel the bespectacled idiot glaring directly at him, and that irritating stare was impossible to ignore. Jiro explains that Reiji challenged him to a match, which is the only reason everyone is gathered here, but Rago shows absolutely no interest in their pointless argument. Reiji then draws his sword and begins preparing himself, causing Jiro to question why his opponent is being allowed to bring a weapon into a simple sparring match. Shiba explains that Reiji belongs to a renowned family of swordsmen. For generations, members of his bloodline have treated their blades almost like extensions of their bodies, making them unwilling to fight without one. Still, if Jiro considers the arrangement unfair, he is welcome to choose a sword for himself. Jiro refuses without hesitation, confident that his bare hands will be more than enough. Reiji then gives Jiro permission to use the hidden advantage resting on his shoulders. He is obviously referring to Rago, but Jiro insults him for treating the Mononoke like some tool he can pull out whenever necessary. This challenge is supposed to settle the problem between Jiro and Reiji alone, meaning neither Rago nor anyone else will take part. Rago has no objection to that decision, and since Jiro insists on handling the fight personally, he curls up again and returns to his interrupted nap. Convinced that Jiro has just thrown away his only real chance of competing, Reiji places his sword on the ground and turns his back. He decides that fighting normally would be far too unfair, so he offers Jiro an enormous advantage. Reiji tells him to attack whenever he pleases and even closes his eyes, promising not to look in his direction. The disrespect immediately sends Jiro charging forward. Before reaching him, however, he suddenly launches himself into the air. Hana assumes he is trying to remove the sound of his footsteps, preventing Reiji from judging his position through noise alone. Shiba doubts that such a basic strategy will accomplish much. Swordsmen with Reiji's experience do not depend entirely on sight, hearing, or measuring the space between themselves and an enemy. After years of training, they develop an instinct powerful enough to detect danger even when their normal senses provide almost nothing. Reiji proves him right almost immediately. The instant Jiro enters striking distance, Reiji reaches down, recovers his sword, and swings at the exact moment needed to intercept him. The blow catches Jiro cleanly and sends him flying across the training area. Believing the result has already been decided, Reiji begins walking away and suggests that Shiba stop the match before Jiro is accidentally killed by another strike. But before he can leave, Jiro rises to his feet and tells him not to end things so quickly. The attack barely registered, and as far as Jiro is concerned, the real fight has not even started. Reiji admits that Jiro's ability to absorb punishment is at least worthy of respect. They rush toward one another again, but this time just before their attacks connect, Jiro smashes straight through Reiji's blade and breaks the sword apart. Using the swordsman's moment of shock, he slips around him and drives a heavy punch directly across his face. Even Shiba is caught off guard by the sudden reversal, since he never expected Jiro to destroy Reiji's weapon and counterattack so cleanly. Reiji remains on the ground for a moment, staring at the shattered blade and struggling to understand how Jiro broke it with such ease. Jiro asks whether that is finally enough to make him surrender. Rather than accepting defeat, Reiji pushes himself upright and declares that his own fight is only beginning now. The battle immediately resumes, with neither one willing to back down. As the two continue trading attacks, Ichika asks Shiba whether a rough sparring match like this can really persuade the Bureau's senior officials, and Shiba assures her that it can. The higher-ups need more than a simple measurement of their physical power, and by watching this fight, they can judge Jiro and Reiji's endurance, their determination under pressure, and exactly how far each of them is willing to push himself before finally reaching his limit. Several hours later, Reiji finally regains consciousness and finds Jiro sitting beside a parked truck. Looking around, he asks where everyone else disappeared to, but Jiro shrugs and says he has no clue since he only woke up a few minutes earlier himself. He casually throws Reiji a can of soda, and Reiji begins considering the outcome of their fight. Since both of them collapsed, calling it a draw would seem fair. Still, Jiro recovered first, so technically, he should probably be declared the winner. Jiro refuses to accept that result and argues that Reiji deserves the victory instead. If Reiji had treated the match as a real battle, his opening strike could have ended Jiro's life. Even the move that shattered his weapon only succeeded because they were fighting with wooden swords. Against an actual blade, Jiro would have lost an arm attempting the same stunt. Reiji is briefly impressed, believing Jiro has finally shown some maturity. But the moment he opens the soda, it erupts all over his face, revealing that Jiro had violently shaken the can before handing it to him. Elsewhere, Hana asks Shiba whether footage from the match will truly persuade the Bureau's senior officials. Shiba tells her that convincing them was never the purpose of the recording. The sparring session was only a preliminary observation, while the real evaluation will begin the following day when the team enters the field. Hana still believes Jiro and Reiji are being sent on an actual operation far too soon, but Shiba sees things differently. Training can only teach them so much, and nothing develops an agent faster than being placed in a genuine mission. More importantly, if events unfold the way he expects, this operation may finally expose whoever has been moving against them from the shadows. Not long afterward, Jiro and the others try on their newly issued uniforms. Shiba admits that the suits make them look surprisingly impressive before instructing everyone to press the control located on their wrists. The moment they do, the combat equipment disguises itself as their ordinary clothing. Jiro then taps the control twice, causing his body to enter a semi-permeable state. Shiba warns them not to abuse that feature. Each activation lowers the suit's overall efficiency, meaning it should be saved for situations where no safer option remains. Roughly an hour later, the team reaches a shrine and pauses to pray for protection from any evil spirits they may encounter. Jiro follows along, though he still cannot understand how visiting a shrine relates to their assignment. Reiji suspects that the location is secretly connected to the bureau, and his guess turns out to be completely accurate. While everyone heads toward the shrine office, Jiro notices a strange hooded man nearby, calmly eating a Snickers bar as though nothing unusual is happening. He barely has time to examine him before realizing the others have already moved ahead, forcing him to hurry after them. Their entrance immediately runs into an embarrassing obstacle. Shiba forgot to arrange an appointment. Fortunately, he manages to talk his way past the staff and secures permission for the group to enter. They soon uncover a concealed staircase beneath the shrine and begin descending far below ground. Their path eventually brings them to the 7th ceiling sanctum. Shiba reveals that this underground chamber is the very location where Rago had once been imprisoned. Every wall surrounding them is formed from an extremely rare stone, known as death obsidian, and nowhere else in the world contains a deposit anywhere near this large. Shiba then decides to divide the team into 2 groups. He and Ichika will speak with anyone who might have witnessed the incident, while Jiro and Reiji remain behind to examine the chamber and learn more about what happened to Rago when he was released. As the two walk away, Ichika quietly asks whether leaving Jiro and Reiji together is really wise, considering how badly they get along. Shiba, however, believes the opposite. In his view, the pair may cooperate more naturally once no one else is standing over them. Left inside the underground chamber, Jiro asks Rago why the Bureau imprisoned him within the obsidian in the first place. Rago gives him the simplest answer possible. He genuinely has no memory of it. Reiji then explains what sealing actually does to a mononoke. Rather than merely trapping its body, the ritual forces its spirit into another vessel and drains nearly every bit of power it possesses. Mononoke naturally exist through living hosts, but a seal condemns them to remain inside lifeless material instead, unable to free themselves. For their kind, it is practically an endless sentence. Reiji has no way of knowing how many years Rago spent inside the stone, but escaping with only damaged memories was unbelievably fortunate. Since the past cannot be recovered all at once, he asks Rago to begin with the moment he woke up and describe anyone he saw nearby. At the same time, Shiba and Ichika reach the facility's monitoring room and immediately discover that someone erased every piece of surveillance footage from the night of the attack. Shiba questions the supervisor about the personnel assigned to the room, only to learn that both guards vanished before the disturbance even began. With no recordings and no witnesses left behind, there is little more they can obtain from the control center. Shiba steps outside and lights a cigarette while sorting through the details in his head. The deeper they investigate, the less this resembles a straightforward raid. Convinced that something important is being hidden, he decides to return with Ichika and compare their findings with the others. Back in the sanctum, fragments of Rago's memory finally begin surfacing. His first clear sensation was the freezing stone pressing beneath his body. The chamber smelled damp and rotten, as though mold had covered the place for years. He had almost no strength left and could barely move, but he forced his eyes open far enough to make out several mononoke gathered around him. Among them was an unfamiliar man who never addressed Rago directly, instead communicating through a tablet. Reiji immediately suspects that this man was the one commanding the entire operation. Rago remembers him attempting to recruit him shortly after the seal was broken. The stranger wanted Rago's power and claimed that, by joining them, he could help prove how helpless humanity truly was against the Mononoke. Rago had no interest in their cause and answered by telling the man exactly where he could go. Not long afterward, the supposed leader vanished in a sudden flash of light. With the group momentarily distracted and no one stopping him, Rago seized the opportunity and fled. Once Rago finishes explaining what he remembers, Jiro complains that the investigation has led them nowhere. They still have no name for the enemy, no clear motive, and no idea what the group intends to do next. Reiji immediately corrects him. Even without identifying the attackers, Reigo's memories revealed several valuable clues. The people behind the raid possessed enough knowledge to destroy the seal holding Rago inside the obsidian. Their leader also spoke to Rago as though they had known each other long before the facility was attacked. Most importantly, the group appears to carry a deep hatred toward both humanity and the Bureau of Espionage, even though the reason behind that hatred remains unknown. Jiro quickly interrupts before Reiji can add anything else, saying his brain has already reached its limit. Still, after taking a moment to sort through everything, he begins connecting a few of the details himself. He is currently fused with Rago, while the people pursuing them possess knowledge related to Mononoke seals and may know how to separate them. Rago cannot remember his past, yet their mysterious leader recognized him immediately. That makes it almost certain that the two shared some kind of history before Rago was ever imprisoned. After considering all of that, Jiro arrives at the most Jiro-like solution possible. He will simply keep punching every enemy who appears until someone gives him the answers he needs. Reiji cannot believe that is the conclusion he reached and immediately tears into him for treating a dangerous investigation like a street fight. Charging toward an unknown organization without a strategy would only get him captured or killed. Their argument ends abruptly when Jiro notices a silent figure standing several steps behind them. It is the same hooded stranger from the shrine entrance, still calmly eating his candy bar as though he has been watching them the entire time. Before either of them can confront him, the man disappears from where he is standing. A fraction of a second later, his presence shifts directly behind Jiro and Reiji. Neither one sees him move, hears a single footstep, or even senses him approaching. By the time they turn around, he has already withdrawn again, leaving both fighters struggling to follow speed that their eyes cannot properly register. The stranger finally pulls back his hood and fixes his attention on Rago. He says he has no intention of allowing two brainless humans to interfere with the reunion he has been waiting for. That single statement tells Jiro and Reiji everything they need to know. This man is not human at all. He is another Mononoke, and judging by the movement he just displayed, he is far more dangerous than the enemies they faced during the transport attack. Without wasting time on questions, both agents activate their uniforms and shift into combat mode. Outside the sanctum, Shiba and Ichika discover that their return path has been completely sealed. A massive barrier now surrounds the underground facility, cutting them off from Jiro and Reiji. Even after examining it closely, Shiba cannot find an obvious weakness. The amount of power maintaining the barrier is far beyond what either of them expected to encounter on a simple investigation, and every second they remain outside leaves the others trapped alone with an unknown Mononoke. While Shiba considers how they might force their way through, he senses someone approaching from behind. The newcomer is Toko Kuzumi, the chief of Special Operations Division 1. The moment Shiba recognizes her, his frustration gives way to an amused grin. Their newly formed team has barely begun its first field assignment, yet the mission has already turned into a disaster involving erased evidence, a sealed facility, and a high-level enemy. And with Toko herself now entering the situation, Shiba realizes the operation is about to become far more interesting than he originally planned. Meanwhile, the hooded Mononoke finally reveals his name as Kuga and boldly announces that he intends to stand above every Mononoke as their future ruler. However, reaching that position will be impossible unless he obtains Rago first. Reiji immediately assumes the guy must be completely delusional. Still, rather than attacking blindly, he decides to keep Kuga talking and asks why Rago is so important to his plan. Kuga happily takes the opportunity to explain. Although Mononoke can live for an incredibly long time, their existence is not completely self-sustaining. They must continue feeding at regular intervals, or their spiritual bodies gradually begin weakening and breaking apart. But Rago is the one known exception. His energy never runs dry, regardless of whether he consumes anything or not. In other words, Rago functions like an endless source of spiritual power, and if Kuga can absorb that ability through fusion, he believes no other Mononoke will ever be capable of challenging him. The moment his explanation ends, Jiro and Reiji prepare themselves, already sensing that Kuga is about to move. Unfortunately, understanding his goal does nothing to solve the problem of his speed. Reiji is struck and thrown aside before he can properly react, while Kuga forces Jiro down against the ground. To him, Jiro is nothing more than a disposable human shell containing the power he actually wants. Once Rago is removed, Kuga has no reason to leave Jiro alive. Kuga then lifts Rago and excitedly tells him that his imprisonment inside a human body will soon be over. Once they merge, the two of them can take control of the entire Mononoke world together. Rago is completely unimpressed. He has no interest in becoming anyone's ruler, and even if that were something he wanted, Kuga would be the last Mononoke he would ever choose as a partner. Kuga is genuinely offended that Rago would reject what he considers such a generous offer. Before he can continue, Jiro grabs tightly onto his leg and refuses to let go, and that brief restraint gives Reiji enough time to move into position and unleash one of his strongest techniques. A powerful slash tears into Kuga and drives him backward. The attack does manage to injure him, but Reiji immediately realizes the damage is far less than intended. His technique was supposed to cut Kuga completely in half, yet it only managed to wound him. That confirms they are dealing with an opponent far tougher than expected. Reiji assumes the others must already know something has gone wrong underground, but there is no telling when help will arrive. Until then, he and Jiro will have to coordinate their attacks and keep each other alive. Kuga becomes furious that two ordinary humans believe numbers alone give them any chance of winning. He announces that Reiji will die first. Jiro, on the other hand, will be kept alive temporarily because Rago still occupies his body, but before that, he plans to tear off every one of Jiro's limbs. Using his own blood, Kuga forms a sword and prepares to continue the battle. At the same time, reinforcements have finally reached the shrine above. Shiba asks Tokieda to examine the barrier sealing the underground sanctum. After inspecting it, Tokieda concludes that the technique itself is not particularly complicated. He should be able to dismantle it within a few minutes. Since Ichika is growing increasingly worried about Jiro and Reiji, she immediately offers to assist and shorten the process. Nearby, Toko confronts Shiba and accuses him of deliberately bringing Jiro into a dangerous situation. From her perspective, he must have expected an attack and used it as an excuse to force the Bureau into accepting Jiro as an active agent. Shiba denies setting any of this up and insists that the ambush was never part of his plan. Even so, he does not appear especially panicked. Shiba believes Jiro and Reiji are capable enough to survive until the barrier comes down. However, if his judgment turns out to be wrong and either of them is harmed, he is fully prepared to accept responsibility for the consequences. At the same time, the battle below has completely turned in Kuga's favor, and Reiji is barely managing to survive his relentless assault. He tries to stop the incoming sword strike with his own weapon, but Kuga's blade smashes straight through it and tears into Reiji's stomach. The impact sends him flying, and before Kuga can move in to finish the job, Jiro rushes forward and throws a punch at him. Unfortunately, Kuga catches the attack without any effort. He looks genuinely disappointed, saying that he expected far more from someone carrying Rago's power. Watching such incredible potential being wasted on a weak host is almost painful to him, so Kuga promises that he will separate Rago from Jiro as soon as possible and free him from this embarrassing situation. Jiro has heard enough and tells him to shut his mouth. Rago has already made it obvious that he wants nothing to do with Kuga, and he certainly has no intention of becoming a weapon for an arrogant idiot like him. Rago normally hates it when Jiro speaks for him, but this time, he agrees with every word. Both of them are determined to bring Kuga down, so Jiro gathers as much of Rago's energy as his body can handle and drives it all into a single crushing punch. Jiro is convinced that an attack carrying that much power must have ended the fight. However, when the dust finally settles, Kuga is still standing. The blow managed to damage his sword and leave him with a few injuries, but it was nowhere near enough to defeat him. Kuga admits that Jiro has finally begun using Rago's strength properly because that punch was at least worthy of some praise. Before the battle can continue, a loud explosion suddenly erupts near the entrance. Jiro has no idea what caused it, but Kuga immediately understands what it means. The agents upstairs have broken through his barrier, and experienced reinforcements will reach them at any moment. Kuga has no interest in testing himself against a group of seasoned fighters, so he decides that today's battle is over and prepares to leave. Jiro angrily calls him a weakling for escaping before their fight is finished, but Kuga reminds him that he could have killed him several times already. The only thing that stopped him was the fact that Jiro's death would also destroy Rago. Kuga promises to return once he has found a safer way to remove Rago and claim his power without killing him in the process. Not long after Kuga disappears, the reinforcements finally arrive, and within a few minutes, everyone is safely taken back to the surface. Once they are outside, Toko warns Shiba that this incident will bring serious consequences. The entire operation was unauthorized, yet it still placed multiple people in unnecessary danger and caused extensive damage to the facility. Shiba calmly says that he is prepared to accept whatever punishment the higher-ups decide to give him. Despite everything that went wrong, he is actually pleased with the outcome. Jiro and Reiji managed to stand their ground against an exceptionally powerful Mononoke, and in Shiba's eyes, that performance should be more than enough to prove that both of them can become valuable members of the crew. Shiba then checks on the younger members and asks Reiji whether he can still stand after taking the worst of Kuga's attacks. Reiji assures him that he will be okay, although he knows the suit is the only reason he survived. It absorbed most of the damage from that strike, and without its protection, he would not be alive right now. Shiba tells him to stop focusing on what could have happened and appreciate the fact that they managed to survive and drive Kuga away. Even so, Reiji cannot feel proud of the result. He was completely overwhelmed during the battle, and the thought of being that powerless leaves him determined to train harder and become far stronger than he is now. Ichika is struggling with the same frustration. She feels that she contributed absolutely nothing while everyone else was fighting below. In her mind, the situation might have ended very differently if she had managed to break through the barrier sooner, but continuing to blame herself will not change what already happened. While Reiji and Ichika remain disappointed in their performances, Jiro is distracted by something Kuga said before escaping. Kuga briefly mentioned Jiro's father, yet Jiro has no idea what he was talking about. His grandfather has raised him for as long as he can remember, and Jiro has never known anything about his real parents. The mystery only adds more confusion to everything happening around him, but he refuses to let it stop him. No matter what answers are waiting ahead, Jiro intends to keep moving forward, give everything he has, and prove that he truly belongs with this team. Shiba is pleased to see that Jiro has not lost his motivation. However, he quickly corrects him on one thing. Jiro did not need to prove that he belonged, because he became a genuine member of the team the moment he joined them. Still, every person in the group has different abilities, flaws, and areas that require improvement. More importantly, they need to learn how to combine those strengths and operate properly as one unit. Shiba promises them that regardless of what kind of danger they face in the future, they will never have to face it without his support. Several days later, Shiba finally returns from his meeting with the Bureau's higher-ranking officials. As expected, he received a long and brutal lecture over the unauthorized operation and everything that went wrong. Fortunately, that problem has now been dealt with, meaning the team can finally focus on its next assignment. Their new objective is a special training exercise, and Shiba explains that a guest instructor will be overseeing the entire session. Before he can properly introduce her, the sound of a young girl laughing comes from the roof of a nearby building. She suddenly leaps from the top, apparently expecting someone below to catch her. Unfortunately, nobody feels particularly motivated to do so, and she crashes face first into the ground. Since Jiro has never seen her before, Shiba introduces the strange girl as Fayu and reveals that despite her human appearance, she is actually a Mononoke. The Bureau normally tracks and eliminates dangerous Mononoke, but peaceful ones are sometimes allowed to live freely as long as they agree to cooperate. Fayu immediately clarifies that she is not some obedient servant following the Bureau's commands. She only works with them because she personally chooses to. Her attention then shifts toward Rago, and she jokingly remarks that he looks much fluffier and cuter than she expected. Rago refuses to accept mockery from someone who resembles a tiny child, and within seconds, the two of them are already shouting dirty insults at each other. Once the argument finally dies down, Shiba orders everyone to take their places so the training can begin. He explains that today's exercise focuses on resisting spectral interference. Jiro has never heard of anything like that, so Shiba tells him that certain Mononoke can manipulate a person's senses through hypnosis or powerful hallucinations. Encountering such an ability for the first time during a real mission could easily get them killed, which is why they need to experience it here under controlled conditions. And that is where Fayu's power becomes useful. She can trap people inside illusions specifically designed for them, and the team's only objective is to escape from those hallucinations using whatever method they can come up with. Fayu immediately activates her ability, and each member is pulled into a separate illusion created around their own memories and fears. Watching from outside, Hana becomes slightly concerned because Shiba never gave them any instructions or even a hint about how to break free. Shiba believes that is exactly what makes the exercise worthwhile. If they can discover an escape on their own, they will have a much better chance of surviving when an enemy uses the same kind of ability against them in the field. Inside his hallucination, Reiji appears in a vast, empty space. He recognizes almost immediately that none of this is real, but knowing that does not help him find a way out. And as he continues walking, a cave slowly comes into view, and he instantly recognizes it. Then someone steps out from the darkness, leaving Reiji completely stunned. Standing before him is the brother he believed he would never see again. Reiji desperately reminds himself that his brother is already dead and that this must be part of the illusion. However, the sword now resting in his hand feels far too solid to simply dismiss. At the same time, Ichika's illusion drags her back into a moment from her childhood, when her mother was still beside her. The younger Ichika excitedly tells her that she wants to become an agent just like both of her parents. Looking back at that memory now, Ichika realizes how innocent she had been. At the time, she truly believed that the heroes would always win and return home safely, but that belief was shattered when her mother left for a mission and never came back. And from that day onward, Ichika devoted herself to training because becoming an agent felt like the only way to remain connected to her mother. Then she eventually discovered that the story she had been told was not entirely true. Her mother had not died during the mission. Instead, a Mononoke had transformed her into stone. The Bureau used every method and resource it could find to reverse the curse, but nothing succeeded. Although her mother is technically still alive, she remains trapped inside the body of a statue. Ichika stands before her petrified mother and promises that she will eventually discover a way to save her. Without warning, the statue begins screaming at her, demanding that she abandon her dream of becoming an agent before she suffers the same fate. Then, right before Ichika's eyes, the stone figure twists and transforms into a terrifying monster. Jiro is facing a similar problem inside his own hallucination, where another monster is already closing in on him. He still has no idea what he is supposed to do to escape the illusion, but standing around and waiting clearly will not help. So for now he decides that defeating the creature in front of him is the best place to start, so he and Rago prepare themselves for battle. And that's the end of this episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.